Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order despite the fact that I didn't call it to order in the first place. So if everyone can take their seats. Just to recap where we are in the agenda, there was disclosures of interest, then committee dealt with a confidential matter. I'm going to, at this time though, since I wasn't here for disclosures, disclose an interest that I have on confidential matter 6.1, which is pertaining to interviews for the London Hydro Board of Directors. One of the candidates to be interviewed has a role in my performance appraisal at my employer, Western University, and so I've declared on that and won't participate, nor did I in those particular interviews. I think all the other disclosures were dealt with, so we are on to consent. There is 6 items in the consent agenda. Does anybody want to deal with any of the consent agenda items separately? Okay, if no one wants to deal with them separately, we can have a motion 2.1 through to 2.6 all together. And I'd look for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Hillier, Councillor Van Meerbergen. Any discussion on any of those items? Okay, I have 2 comments then, 1 comment, 1 question on the items. The comment is on the report that I wrote, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference. It was certainly a good conference, very productive, and I'll continue to emphasize the importance of this year for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and all municipalities, as there is a federal election. Recently this week, you will see FCM start to come out with its policy. The first piece will be geared towards making the additional gas tax money that we recently received permanent, and we'll be certainly lobbying the parties on that. And you'll see other elements of the platform for municipalities coming out over the weeks to come. And there will certainly be a role for municipal councils, councillors, and citizens in our municipalities to play in ensuring that all the candidates in the federal election for all parties know the importance of municipalities in the upcoming election, and certainly we will be looking for them to support the municipal agenda moving forward. So that work continues, and that was just a recap of the annual meeting that I drafted for the committee. The question I have is actually on the investment report, which is 2.2, and I noted that we are slightly out of alignment with our plan, although I would say I don't have a lot of concerns with that because where the money is where it's making the most interest, it seems. And my question is, do you anticipate us staying in that range for a period of time as the interest rates stay there, kind of weighted towards the short-term investments? Or do you expect us to return more to kind of our target policy in the future? I'll look to the treasurer for that.
Thank you, through the chair. So one of the things that we've been trying to implement is a bit of a laddering strategy so that we make consistent investment over time. And as we've been looking at the rates, we've been obviously one of our top priorities is to invest where we most prudently can make the best return. So as the rates have done some unusual swings that were not very well predicted, I would say, we've been monitoring them closely, and we've been selecting as we look at our monthly investment targets to pursue the avenue that has actually provided the most return. So right now, the short-term rates are actually providing us with better returns than the medium and the long-term. So we are monitoring that quickly. Right now, it's hard to say exactly when that will change, but we're making those decisions as we continue to look at that. And we've seen a bit of an intersection with some of the rates and some of the bonds and how things are going forward. So I think it's something that certainly there are still diversifying views on some of the areas of the banks in particular, that some are still looking at rate increases, some are below, and so it's really challenging at this point in time to identify where it's actually going to go. So it's right now, certainly our targets are as per the policy, but we will certainly, as we're looking to invest, choose the one that will give us the greatest flexibility. We certainly don't want to lock into rates where we're getting short-term returns that are greater than locking in at this point in time. So if we start to see that change in the next 6 months, certainly our strategies will move more towards the policy, but not until such time that they will result in better returns.
And just as a follow-up, I'll make one comment. I know that we recently changed our targets. We certainly wouldn't be far off the previous targets. I just want to ensure, first off, I support 100% the plan that you're executing. Going where the largest returns are is certainly a very prudent way to manage Londoners' money. There is enough flexibility in the policy to maintain that over the period of time that you see necessary. We don't have to make any policy changes. You don't see any restrictions to continuing along this path of being slightly outside our target corridor while the rates kind of dictate that that's where we should be. She says yes. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
This equity fund is quite interesting. So this would be new for the corporation of the City of London to go into this type of investment?
So through the chair, it's not entirely new, but we've never invested up to the maximum that was allowed under our current policy. So I think as we've been looking, as the Prudent Investor Act has come in, this is kind of the first step that we would take to start moving towards more of a balanced portfolio to actually utilize what's already within our existing policy to be able to go to that 5% that is already recommended within there. So rather than, using our brokers, and we do have other vehicles that we currently go, this would be one mechanism that has through their objectives very similar to ours, and that's where we've been going through the agreements to identify what they're comprised of, their objectives, et cetera, to move forward. So it's certainly in line with what it is that we've been looking to do on a longer term perspective. I think we wanted to be very open and transparent about, even though the policy has been there, we've never gone to that extent, and that we're taking that step forward. And certainly through some of the future accounting changes and things, you'll be able to see some of that a little bit more transparently going forward as well, because it'll require us in the future to actually start to show those ups and downs in a given year. So over the long term, we feel that this is a very, very prudent thing to do, and it's in line with what we already have. It's a very, very small percentage, but certainly we wanted to be open with our council and committee to say this is where we're moving. It's the good first step to gauge how we wish to proceed with the prudent investor standard. And then as we start to look at how that's going over time and hopefully start to show some maximizing our returns in the future, we could in fact look to possibly extend that in the future.
Go ahead.
And these equities aren't swashbuckling Buccaneer type equities. These are nice, conservative.
Yes, that's correct. So these are, and so when we look at that, they very much balanced. It's still equities, but still of the highest quality. So that's something obvious when we did our due diligence, is to look at exactly what kind of investments, what grades they are, et cetera, so that we're not putting any risk in limiting our exposure. So certainly it's something that over time we look to maximize, but absolutely that is a very important part in terms of determining how we would proceed with the choice of equities.
Thank you.
Any further questions? And we have 2.1 to 2.6 all on the agenda at once, and it's been moved and seconded. No, seeing none, we will open that slate of reports for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 4-0.
Well, I can't deal with the tax adjustment agenda until 12:45. And then there are a couple of items from the mayor, which I believe he is attending the meeting, which I'll deal with either if we need to or when he arrives. So what I can do is the corporate services deferred matters list, which is basically for any questions that colleagues would have. It outlines the expected timeline for replies on the list, and then we can certainly receive that list. So does anybody have any questions about the deferred matters list? If not, I'll need a mover and a seconder for receipt. Councillor Keabaga, Councillor Van Meerbergen. We will open that for voting on the system.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 4-0.
Colleagues, I understand the mayor will be here in about 8 minutes for the planned start of the original meeting before the date, or the time was changed to 10 a.m., which was done with the regular agenda. So I'd like to wait for him on 4.1 and the added, which is also from his office, 5.2. The in-camera session, I would prefer to deal with all at once, because there's no reason on going in, lining up staff, and then coming out. And the tax adjustment agenda, I can't deal with till 12:45. So my intent would be that we simply recess for 8 minutes. And, yes, I guess committee, you could deal with the appointments for which I had a conflict and went into camera for. I would turn the chair over to Councillor Kayabaga, and you could deal with any sort of recommendations coming out of your in-camera interviews. So we could certainly do that now. I certainly have a conflict on this, so I won't chair, but I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Kayabaga. This would be under basically items that are coming out of in-camera. So Councillor Kayabaga, you have the chair.
Thank you. So I'd like to look to the committee to see if someone would like to move a motion with a recommendation, or if we want to proceed with a ranked ballot. It's been prepared by staff if we need to do that. So you want to do a ranked ballot, or you want to?
Thank you. Through the acting chair, the question is whether or not the committee is required to do a ranked ballot. It's an option that's available to you. You're not locked into that, with any sort of policy at this point. So if there was a motion that one of the members wanted to make, they could do so, or we have a ranked ballot prepared.
So if you would like to move a motion, you can go ahead and do that. And if you have a seconder, Councillor Van Meebergen.
Yeah, I'll move Sarah Short-Reed.
Second.
Through the chair, the motion will be on the screen in just a moment. And it is some standard wording, and I just wanted to introduce what the wording looks like. So you'll see that this will involve the introduction of a bylaw, and it notes that the candidate selected for appointment is Sarah Short-Reed.
Okay, I ask you to look to your screen. We're going to call to vote. Is there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we're going to vote. Michael Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. And I just want to thank all of the candidates and point out that we had some staggering experience available to us. This was this is a great choice. There are other great choices too. And point out that there may be some, very soon, some other opportunities for individuals to serve on the board, as we are hoping to ask for an affiliate coming up next month, and to give London Hydro some other opportunities. And so I think we can keep all these individuals in mind for that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Councillor Van Meebergen.
Yeah, I have to echo my fellow Dutchman there. It was actually very pleasantly surprising to see the level of quality and competence that came forward, and their desire to do civic good. So with regard to Ms. Shortreed, I think she brought the best package of skill sets, and it was very impressive, and I'm happy to nominate her.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and look to our screen and vote.
Closing the vote, that motion is passed 3-0 with 1 recused.
Thank you, and I'm going to return the chair back to Councillor Morgan.
Okay, thank you. So we're in the same situation we were before, just with only 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to call a 5-minute recess. Is there a mover or a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kaibaga, seconded by Councillor Hillier. We'll recess for 5 minutes and then we'll resume the meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, so recess over. Slightly shorter than school recess, but recess nonetheless. We have 3 items left on the public agenda, then an in-camera piece, although one is restricted till 12:45 or later. So we'll deal with 4.1, which is a request for additional honorees for the mayor's New Year's honor list. We have a letter drafted by the mayor, and the mayor's here, so maybe I'll turn it over to him to present his letter.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. You'll note, I think the letter was, is clear and self-explanatory, but let me give you a bit of the rationale if I can. We have up to 10 individuals who are part of the mayor's honors list, and I know that is the thoughtful way to comment on it because the mayor signs, we have, as you know, have an event here at council, and we honor those individuals who come from committees, and I think that's through committees and through advisory groups, and I think those are very appropriate and very worthy. What I note, though, is that I've had requests already from councillors who have said, well, what about so-and-so who might never qualify as a result of the, not that they're not worthy, but that in some fashion they would never, because they don't sit on a certain advisory board or committee, would never get a chance. So it struck me that one of the ways to do this was to have some opportunity for, I know it says for the mayor to appoint, but frankly, this is ultimately for council to appoint. But for this to be a little bit broader opportunity for councillors to put some names forward as well that are outside the broader bounds or the focused bounds of specific committees. And look, we've got upwards of 10 individuals that get honored annually, and we don't want this to be the never-ending list. So I thought a respectable and proper number might well be 4, and I would invite councillors to participate in that for the opportunity of being able to bring forward people who are truly worthy of that, and therefore we would name them to the honors list. It just felt not disingenuous, but a little bit strange, if I might, that the mayor's honors list, and I might not know any of them. I think there was one I did know in the last 10, and as I recall, it was, you may recall, it was a woman and her service dog who did great community work, the 2 of them. So I'm not sure if that's the first time we've actually ever kind of honored a person and their animal, but appropriate under that circumstance. But I guess I'm looking at this, and I'd like to open it up so that council members have a broader opportunity to bring names forward. And I don't want to add extra bureaucratic responsibility to councillors, but I think it ultimately we have the responsibility to support. And as far as I know, we've never particularly challenged any of those committee selections. But I think it would be appropriate that council has the opportunity through the mayor's office to be able to make some selections. So hence that recommendation, and I would open it up for any comments, questions, thoughts, what colleagues think.
Sure, comments, questions, thoughts? I know I have a few, but Councillor Kayabagha, go ahead.
Thank you, through your chair. I think that it's a great idea to open it up to a broader spectrum and have more names being put forward. I wonder what the process will be, how we will be able to do that, and if we are adding more names on the 10, or if this is going to be carried on for the following years. I really think that it's a great idea because there's a lot of people in our community that we can't know them all, but there's different people in different wards that are doing the great things that should be recognized. So I thank you for the opportunity to be able to recognize our members in our community and in our respective wards as well. So I know that there's been people in my ward that have been nominated a lot of times, but there's also other people who are doing great things that would be great for us to just bring forward their names, and it kind of helps be the ear and the eyes of different parts of the community. So I think it's a great initiative.
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kayabagha. There's 2 parts to that. You asked about process, and I think that's frankly, I thought it was more appropriate to firstly to run this idea through committee and ultimately council, and if they and if there was broad support as I'm hoping, that it would be my commitment to come back to this committee with the process details, and not overly bureaucratic. Again, I say it that way, but straightforward, but ultimately with the notion that we would have participation in that. And my number is 4, because I felt that was an appropriate number. But if this does get approved, it would be my commitment to this committee to come, and council to come back with what those steps are. And in no way to diminish the role of the advisory committees in terms of their putting names forward. Those tend to be very specific and secular with respect to their organizations. And this is broader and intended to be such. So if you'd allow me, then I would come back if we get approval for this, I'd come back to the committee well beforehand with the idea of process, so that we could, with the plan of engaging it for this New Year's Eve, which typically, I'm going to trick you, I think that means December, that we would have honorees names. So there would be a process involved with that, and I'd come back to you with that.
Sure. I'm going to make a couple comments. First off, I support the idea. I think it's a great approach to be able to expand it and recognize additional Londoners. I think with respect to the process that we could follow, I would suggest that maybe this committee could move a motion in support of the concept, and then direct or ask the mayor to work with the clerk's office. And I say that because they kind of work with all the other processes that have gone through, and make sure it's shepherded through the proper committee in camera to protect the names of the individuals, and that we have all the procedural components right, to work together and come back with a process that would be here for the committee's consideration, and then we could approve that process at that time. So we could support the idea today and initiate that, and then work out the details later. And the mayor certainly could hear the comments today, and then work that in his work with the clerks to bring back a policy. That's what I would suggest. I'm not going to move a motion from the chair, but those are my comments, and we'll see if colleagues want to move in that direction or not. Councillor Kaibaga.
I'd be happy to move that, Chair.
Okay, so we'll have that worded properly, and then we'll get it on the screen, and then moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Kaibaga. Any other comments on this? Okay, then let's wait for the language to come up. We'll make sure that it looks okay to everybody, and then we can either have further discussion or move to a vote. Okay, if you hit current item, you'll see the language. I'm going to read it out for those following along at home who can't see that. That the communication dated July 11, 2019 from Mayor E. Holder with respect to the request for additional honorees to be recommended at the selection of the mayor and council be referred to Civic Administration to report back to the Corporate Services Committee at a future date with respect to a policy to be introduced. And certainly we know that the mayor will be involved in that referral to Civic Administration. Moved by Mayor Holder, or would you like to change the language?
Well, just as long as it's clear that the intent would be for it to qualify for, I know that there's a timeline in October. I think I made some reference to December, but obviously this has to. So with the intention of this would be the only clarity around it, with the intention that it be effective with honorees to be named for the January 1, 2020 timeframe, that's all.
We're going to add that in, just to make sure it's really clear.
Thanks.
Okay, if you click current item again, you'll see that it's been refreshed and it says all the same stuff, but to report back to Corporate Service Committee at a future date with respect to a policy to be introduced to allow for recognitions to commence in January of 2020. Good? Okay, so that moved by Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Kaibaga. Any other discussion on this one? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
And 5.2 on the added agenda, use of council chambers for the sovereign medal ceremony. A letter from, oops, sorry about that. A letter from Mayor Holder. I'll turn it over to you to introduce this.
Thank you again, Chair. I received a letter some weeks ago from the Governor General requesting that I preside over the presentation of some 8 sovereigns medal for volunteerism, pardon me, 7. There was 8, but we took one off the list because it felt weird to present one to myself. And I only share that with you, not for ego purposes, but it was actually quite weird. And so the person who had put my name in nomination, as it turns out, made a private presentation. There's no formality as far as you can have a sovereign's medal mailed to you and you get that in 3 months, or if you want to go to the Governor General's residence of Rita Hall, it's 2 years. I was advised a year ago, May. So in fact, anyone who's a recipient is aware of this. This is now, it's not a surprise to them. It's a function of fulfilling the ceremony, and it's common that mayors do this as a way to expedite the delivery of their medals. So there are 7 individuals whom we intend to recognize here. And I approached the clerk's office and they said that the council chamber is intended to be for the council's business. And that ultimately we as masters of our own fate can determine what we would do. I felt it appropriate, though, that this being the center of London's civic political world sphere would be absolutely the place. I could go to Centennial Hall, I suppose. I can go to the Hilton. I can do whatever as I've been asked, and I've accepted that responsibility to do it. But I think here in this chamber, inviting all council members, certainly their families would be invited. Typically, I participated in a ceremony once when I was a member of Parliament for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee medals, and I was asked to present those. We had those at the Hunt Club at the time, and we would have had some 25 representatives, and there were some 50 guests, so each brought 1, 2, maybe even 3 people, but that was the extent of it. Here, it would be my intention to do it here with the support of council, to invite all councillors, to invite the family members of those recipients, names you will recognize, by the way. It's a great honor for them to have received it because it's the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteerism. And I just do not believe that this council chamber should be excluded from that opportunity to showcase these individuals. And I think we're all proud of this facility, and it struck me that this would be the total, this would be an absolute appropriate purpose. You'll note the date we picked, September the 18th, did not conflict with any other council event. We picked 4 till 6 p.m. to get the maximum number of recipients in attendance. And that's the extent of it. I would, through the mayor's budget, which is waning quickly, but I would tell you that we intended to have some sandwiches and soft drinks in the councilor's lounge would be the idea, something along that line, or if that's too small, depending on the numbers, I don't think it would be, but possibly one of the committee rooms. So I haven't included that in it, but it's with the intention of using this prestigious venue for a prestigious award.
Okay, thank you. So the request of committee, and we have some language drafted, would be for permission to use council chambers for that event on September 18th, 2019. So mover by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Any further discussion? Councillor Kaibaga?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just have some questions. I'm not against this specific event being held here, as I think the clerk had communicated to you that it is in council business. So my question is this an open door for other people to come and suggest different events of that nature to come and take place here? Is it something that would, be practiced by different mayors in the future? Or are we just doing a special permission for you to, for the mayor to use, through your chair, this specific room for this specific event only? What happens if in the future there's another list of recipients for London, and are you going to be requesting, through your chair, Mayor, are you going to be requesting to use the chamber again, or how is this going to? I'm just trying to understand how this is going to work out, because one event, it doesn't seem like a harmful thing, but could there be potential problems that may arise from allowing this space to be used for council meetings or committee meetings?
Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much. I think that's a thoughtful question. I will tell you, we also use this room for the Police Services Board meetings as well, so it's not without precedent. We've got 3 members of council who happen to be on that committee, and we have our public meetings here because there's a public forum opportunity with this. This specific request is not intended to be one to set a precedent. And so it's very specific to September the 18th, 4 to 6, to answer question 1. But if I'm ever asked by the Governor General to do something, or if this council was, I promise you I would absolutely come back and make a separate request without precedent and without, so we're doing this without prejudice vote. But what a great honor that these people have been selected. This is not just the Governor General, this is under the auspices of the Queen. So it has that extra level of pomp to it, which is why it felt appropriate that we have this facility. But to be specific to your question, Councillor Kaibaga, this is a one-time request for a one-time opportunity to honor 7 pretty unique individuals.
Councillor Kaibaga?
I just want to make it clear that I don't dispute that this is a great honor event, but this is probably happening every year for a long time. I don't know, I'm not against it, and I'm not against the idea. I just wonder if maybe staff or civic administration wants to look into better managing these type of events in this space. Maybe we can probably direct staff to have a policy on how we can use the space. It is a public space at the end of the day, and we do pay, as taxpayers, we do pay for the space. And it is a great place to recognize amazing members of our community. I just wonder if we're starting to just go by approving this event, if without a plan on how we're going to deal with this in the future, it's going to get a little messy, where different people are going to want to do different award ceremonies in the space. And I'm going by the response that we had heard from the clerk, was that the chamber is normally left for those specific meetings, and I think it's a great idea to host it here. I'm just trying to have a more, maybe direct staff to have a plan on how we can go by this. And you don't have to come back to council next year and ask and request to have this event again, where maybe there could be a plan in place for this ongoing event to continue, or similar events to continue. That's what I was saying. I'm not against celebrating these members of our community. I think it's an honor to have Londoners recognized. My only worry is not having a plan in place on how we do these things might be confusing, and that's about it.
Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much, Chair. I think the councillor's comments are well intended and well considered. I would say that what I'd suggest is that if this happens, it hasn't happened before in this council's 7 months, 3 weeks and 1 day until now. And it may never happen again for the life of this term. I'm a little mindful about putting a plan or a policy together, unless there's something that might be habitual. And if we had a sense of it, I would absolutely come right back and say, I think your suggestion's a great one. So, and a nice problem to have in some respects, but no one has approached us beyond this request from the Governor General specifically. And as I say, we can have it anywhere, and I just felt that this chamber brought the respect and the pomp and circumstance. So may I suggest, and I'd be happy to say that if we get any similar requests, you know I will take it back to this committee. And then I think we've got something to ask the clerk to work with. I just don't want to have something if it doesn't happen more than this time. I think that would just, they have enough work to do, I think, at this stage. So, but I promise it would come back here, I mean, it has to, and deal with that as a plan as we need to, if we need to.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll make just one. I think Councillor Kaibaga's concern is well warranted. I certainly understand that we wouldn't want to continually use council chambers for business that may be outside of the regular scope. What I will say is that this particular chamber is the seat of government. It represents the government of the City of London, and it's probably appropriate for each and every single request to use the chambers, as the clerk has directed, to come before committee and council for its authorization. I would be hesitant to delegate that to a process or a policy. I know we've given permission through a debate and a discussion for the Police Services Board to hold their meetings here, and it has been authorized by council to do so. It's probably appropriate as the formal seat of government for that to continue to come back to committee each and every time. I don't think it's burdensome to have a letter representing it and outlining the case. Quite frankly, I think that's a barrier that probably should be there for the seat of government. So I'm very comfortable with the request, and the draft language of the motion is up now if you click current item, which basically authorizes it as outlined in the mayor's letter for that one time, and any subsequent requests would have to come back to committee and council. Any further discussion? Nope. Councillor Van Holst.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry,
I'm
I don't
just-
look that way very often.
Yes, I want to say, I think it was an important and good discussion that the committee just had. I hope that you'll support the recommendation, and if not, let me be the first to offer my backyard for such a prestigious event. Thank you.
Thank you for the open invitation to use your backyard anytime, Councillor Van Holst. I see no other discussion, so we'll open this for voting. And again, the language is on the screen. Perhaps I will read it for those who can't see it. That the use of the City of London Municipal Council chambers for the Sovereign's Medal presentation ceremony by the Mayor, completed at the request of the Governor General, be approved in accordance with the communication of the Mayor dated July 18th, 2019. Moved and seconded. Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
Thank you, and well done by everybody for putting us past the 12:45 mark so that we can now do the tax adjustment agenda, which is our scheduled item. I will note there is an added piece to this particular report, which essentially just removes two of the tax adjustment requests. So the requests are all the same, there's just two fewer, as outlined on the added agenda. So what we'll be discussing and considering today is all of the tax adjustments minus the two that are outlined in the added agenda. This is one of those components where we do allow the public, it's not a public participation meeting, but we allow the public to comment on the tax agenda before. I don't see any members of the public in the gallery today, but I will ask one time, just in case someone's ducking down up there, if there's anybody who'd like to comment on the tax adjustment agenda. I don't see any. So we have a prepared motion for this. It's pretty standard because we do this on a regular basis, so I'd look for a mover and a seconder of that. Councillor Hillier, Mayor Holder, any discussion on any questions of staff of the tax adjustment agenda? No? Seeing none, then we can open that for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 5-0.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Just a question as it relates to the piece that we just voted on, not the content of it, but the question I've got, and that is the timing not to be heard before 12:45. Always been a little curious. Sometimes we have certain things in meetings like last night were not to be heard until 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. I understand that from sometimes a request as it relates to scheduling of individuals to present themselves. But I noted that the gallery wasn't particularly packed today, and I was just wondering what the logic of the 12:45 was, if you might give me some wisdom, please.
Yes, there is a notice requirement for the tax adjustment agenda. I think I don't know, Mr. Logan, Jim is here. He can comment on the notices that go out and the communications. So sometimes some of this stuff and the dates and times are communicated. So Mr. Edmonds can comment on that.
Yes, through the chair. Excuse me. Notifications are sent to all of the applicants 14 days prior to the hearing here today, or the council committee meeting. As for the timing of when the committee meeting takes place, we're advised of what that time is, and we just adhere to be here. So where that came from, I can't comment on, but the taxpayer is provided notice of time and location.
So in other words, we can certainly set the time and location, but we need to do so in time for the notices. In this case, it was set for 12:45, so we were restricted to put it there. I suppose we could, in the future, schedule them for the start of the Corporate Services Committee. I know that there's a balance between scheduling it in a realistic way so that Londoners aren't showing up early and then having to wait, but also not getting in the situation that we get in sometimes when we're really efficient with our committee work. So with the tax adjustment agenda, we could endeavor to do this closer to the start of the committee meeting time, and that way we wouldn't run into this particular item. I will note that this committee meeting did start a little earlier, so there was an odd change in the schedule in time for the agenda. The notices probably would have been informed, and we added the interviews and scheduled things a little bit differently. So maybe today's agenda was a little bit different than normal, but I certainly hear the point, and I'm certainly happy to discuss with the clerks about the appropriateness of scheduling the tax adjustment agenda at the start of the meeting. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just thank you, not to prolong this any longer, because we no longer have a time constraint to be concerned about, except a Civic Works meeting later today. But it strikes me that if the issue of the tax adjustment agenda is in, it's in. Now, a little different if you've ended one meeting early and people were expecting to participate. So it would make sense if 12:30 was the start time that you wouldn't do it till at least 12:30. I just don't even know why there's except for an odd circumstance like that, I just don't know why there's even a time referenced on this, unless we did a specific request from someone. Sometimes we do things because we do them. Just curious.
Really, the answer is it's for the convenience of the public to know the approximate time that we would deal with that item and not before. Again, we can do things differently, and I think we can certainly have a discussion about what works best. I know we've made some adjustments to planning committee. I've certainly sat through lots of planning committee. I don't think it ever really goes on the time that it's scheduled, but you also don't want big gaps in the meeting either. So certainly, a discussion, I think, but that's the rationale that we have today. So any other deferred matters or additional business? No, seeing none. So what we have left is confidential items 6.2 to 6.6 on the regular agenda and 6.7 on the added agenda. Those are the only remaining items left on the committee's agenda. So I would look for a motion to move into camera. My intent would be to move the committee room, deal with all of those items, and then open the committee room for the public to participate in the last component, which would be adjournment of the meeting. So we'll adjourn from the committee room, but we'll open the doors when we get to that piece. So a motion to go into camera for the remaining camera items. Councillor Kaibaga, Councillor Hillier, any discussion? No, we'll open that for voting. just as we're voting, usually we read out the added items because it's on the added agenda. For those following along, I'll ask the clerk to do that.
Thank you. And through the chair, the added confidential is a matter pertaining to the proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality, including communications necessary for that purpose, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, commercial and financial information that belongs to the municipality and has monetary value or potential monetary value, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality. Closing the vote, and that motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the committee room.